On the night of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off into a clear sky, carrying 239 people and a routine flight plan. Its crew signed off with air traffic control. The Boeing 777 climbed steadily, crossed the coastline, and began its journey across the South China Sea. But then, the unimaginable happened. The plane vanished. No distress signal, no mayday, no emergency call. One of the most advanced aircraft in commercial service disappeared as if it never existed. For years, the world has been gripped by this enigma. Governments launched the most expensive search in aviation history. Theories bloomed: terrorism, mechanical failure, pilot suicide, even abduction by the extraordinary. But despite debris washing ashore and countless hours of underwater scans, no wreckage has ever been located. Now, a veteran airline pilot, combining satellite data, flight behavior patterns, cockpit protocol, and chilling simulations, has finally uncovered what may be the most plausible and devastating explanation yet. And what he discovered changes everything we thought we knew. This isn't a theory, this is reconstruction, and it leads us directly to the final moments of MH370. The mystery isn't unsolvable anymore. It's been hiding in plain sight. It began like every other flight, a routine pre-dawn departure from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Flight 370 climbed to 35,000 feet, cleared for direct routing, and handed off to Vietnamese airspace. But after that final contact, silence. No check-in, no transponder, no radar. The aircraft was gone. For 18 crucial minutes, no one noticed. Malaysia assumed Vietnam had taken over. Vietnam waited for a call that never came. It wasn't until a concerned call from Vietnam to Malaysia that anyone realized an aircraft had disappeared. The first frantic search was centered over the South China Sea, where radar contact was lost, but nothing was found. Then, 5 days later, came a revelation that shook investigators. The Malaysian military had tracked the aircraft reversing course, turning west, crossing the Malaysian peninsula, and heading into the Andaman Sea. The aircraft hadn't crashed after losing radar contact. It was still flying for hours. This was no accident. This was intentional. The first clue that MH370 was not under automated control came from its flight path. As it reversed over the peninsula, the aircraft made subtle course corrections, but autopilot systems typically maintain a fixed heading. The path of MH370, however, was anything but fixed. It adjusted to avoid air traffic. It made turns sharp enough to dodge military detection. One of the most compelling indicators of human control came from a maneuver executed just before the aircraft would have entered Thai airspace. A tight 38-degree bank angle, a move uncharacteristic of the autopilot, which typically limits banks to 25 degrees. This turn kept the aircraft just outside Thai military radar coverage. Even more chilling was the simulator data found in Captain Zahari's home. Among hundreds of saved routes, one stood out, a nearly identical path to the presumed flight route of MH370, over the peninsula, into the Indian Ocean, and ending in remote waters. The simulator scenario was loaded just weeks before the flight. The aircraft in the simulation was loaded with an identical fuel amount. The flight plan matched not only in direction but in logic. This wasn't a coincidence, it was practice. There was a narrow window between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, where no one was watching. A handover zone controlled by Malaysia but delegated from Singapore, where aircraft were often released early out of habit. It was the perfect blind spot. If the hijacker were the captain, this would have been the moment. Under the guise of routine, he could have asked the co-pilot to step out, perhaps for a coffee or to communicate with cabin crew. Once alone, the cockpit door would be locked. From there, everything could be executed in minutes. First, he would switch off the transponder, instantly erasing the aircraft from civilian radar. Then, with deliberate precision, power would be shut down to disable satellite tracking. But the system wouldn't send an alert. It would simply go dark, no error codes, no red flags. Only later, when systems were restarted, would it ping again. What followed was a chilling display of control. The aircraft flew past Penang, Zahari's hometown, and made a series of navigational decisions to avoid all radar coverage. It followed established airways to blend in. It pinged a cell phone tower briefly, just once, as if someone tried, then gave up on a final contact. The plane continued to fly for hours, alone, silent, hidden. Only one source still knew it existed, a satellite operated by Inmarsat. At irregular intervals, the aircraft sent automated handshakes, digital pings confirming its presence but revealing nothing more. By calculating the timing and angle of these pings, scientists could place the plane within arcs, curves of probable location on Earth's surface. The last of these arcs placed the aircraft deep in the southern Indian Ocean. The path, silent, steady, led away from all land, from all radar, from all escape. When fuel finally ran out, simulations suggest the right engine flamed out first, causing the plane to bank left. The autopilot, still engaged, corrected. Moments later, the second engine died. Autopilot disconnected. Now powerless, the aircraft began its terminal descent. Depending on whether a human was still at the controls, it may have spiraled violently or glided gracefully. But whatever the final angle, one thing is certain: the crash site is near the final arc. Boeing's own engineers ran simulations confirming this. The wreck should lie within 29 miles of that arc. But despite millions of dollars, months of searches, and some of the best underwater mapping systems in the world, no wreckage has ever been found. And that leads us to the final question, one that the pilot's reconstruction doesn't just ask, it dares to answer. At precisely 2:25 a.m., the satellite communication system on MH370 comes back online. Why? Because after flying manually for over an hour in total darkness, the person in control switched the aircraft's generators back on, reactivating not only cabin systems, but also the autopilot and the satellite ping module. The aircraft now sends a handshake signal to Inmarsat, and the first arc is established. But the signal reveals something more than presence. It reveals the moment control shifted from manual flight to automation again, just as the aircraft made its final major turn. This maneuver, likely entered into the flight management system, redirected the plane toward the vast southern Indian Ocean. It was a heading that offered nothing: no land, no rescue, no return. It was a flight path toward oblivion. And what makes this even more haunting is how deliberate it was. Military radar caught the plane at the edge of its range, turning west and then south. From that point forward, no further radar contact was made. The plane became invisible once again, except to the Inmarsat satellite, which would continue receiving hourly signals from a ghost gliding through the sky. Every movement of MH370 from that point seems calculated, engineered to minimize detection and maximize disappearance. The chosen flight corridor was used by other commercial jets, meaning the aircraft could blend into air traffic patterns. The altitude remained steady. The heading was consistent. There were no erratic maneuvers, no signs of confusion, just precision. And then came the heartbreak. 7 hours after departure, the final handshake was sent, a log-on request. This event only happens when power is restored to the satellite system, like when the engines flame out and the auxiliary power unit kicks in. It was the system's final breath. After that, nothing. This data, combined with Boeing's simulations, has allowed experts to map the final descent. In every model, the aircraft either entered a spiraling dive after losing engine power or glided gradually into the sea. The area where it likely fell, known as the seventh arc, is incredibly remote. The seabed is jagged and complex, and storms had already passed through the region. Whatever fell into that water may have broken apart and scattered silently across a landscape few humans have ever seen. 2 years after the disappearance, a piece of debris washed ashore on Reunion Island. It was a flaperon, part of a 777's wing. It was positively identified as belonging to MH370. More debris followed. Fragments of fuselage, interior cabin parts, even an engine cowling, all confirmed through serial numbers. All from one aircraft, and all located along the eastern shores of Africa, thousands of miles from where the search had first begun. Ocean drift modeling supported a crash site within the southern Indian Ocean. The currents matched. The debris paths were consistent. But while the surface wreckage was found, the seafloor remained silent. Several exhaustive search missions combed the area near the seventh arc. Submersibles mapped thousands of square kilometers. Ships listened for locator beacons. But the wreck itself, the fuselage, the black boxes, remained out of reach. How could this be? How could an aircraft the size of a Boeing 777, one of the most advanced in the world, vanish completely in the age of satellite tracking and real-time surveillance? And yet, that is what happened. Because what MH370 revealed wasn't just a failure of flight, it was a failure of the entire system meant to track it. There was no claim of responsibility, no distress call, no ransom demands, no manifesto. If this was a hijacking, it was unlike any in history. The pilot didn't redirect the plane to a political target. He didn't crash it into a city. He didn't use it as a weapon. He flew it for hours, across airspaces, across boundaries, across oceans, and then let it disappear. And if Captain Zahari was the one in control, as evidence increasingly suggests, the question becomes even darker. Why? Investigators found no note, no final message, no warning. But what they did find was a deeply personal simulation, a political sentence handed down to a man he admired just hours before the flight, and a flight plan that eerily mirrored the real-world disappearance. Some call it a protest, others call it a crime, some refuse to believe it at all. But one fact remains: the pilot knew how to disappear. He knew when radar coverage dropped, how to isolate the plane from tracking systems, how to fly manually over water, and how to vanish without a trace. This wasn't improvisation. This was preparation. And the only remaining mystery is what else he took with him when he dove into the dark. For nearly a decade, Flight MH370 has haunted the world like a phantom, an airplane that took off under clear skies and never came home. But now, piece by piece, the silence is breaking. Not through speculation, not through conspiracy, but through cold data, deliberate flight paths, and a reconstruction led not by guesswork, but by experience. What this pilot uncovered wasn't just the likeliest explanation, it was a chilling masterpiece of disappearance. A plan executed with precision, with knowledge of radar blind spots, satellite systems, and emergency protocols. Whoever was at the controls didn't panic. They prepared. And in doing so, they revealed the darkest truth of all, that even in our hyper-connected world, a plane can still vanish, if someone wants it badly enough. But MH370 is more than a mystery. It's a mirror that reflects the gaps in our systems, the assumptions in our training, the blind trust we place in silence. It showed us that black boxes are only helpful if they're found, that pings mean nothing if no one can interpret them, and that closure can't come from drift models or press conferences. It comes from truth. And this truth hurts, because it didn't have to end this way. It wasn't weather. It wasn't mechanical failure. It wasn't an act of terror. It was a sequence of decisions, possibly by a single man, that erased 239 lives and left the world chasing shadows across the Indian Ocean. So the next time you board a plane and hear the cockpit greet the tower, remember this: communication is more than protocol. It's presence. It's accountability. It's the one thread we hold onto when everything else slips away. Flight MH370 didn't vanish because it couldn't be found. It vanished because someone made sure we wouldn't know where to look. If this story shook you, share it. Because silence is the only thing keeping this mystery alive. And if you want more hidden truths, revealed piece by piece, subscribe. We're just getting started.